The stars burned cold in the void, a glittering tapestry of indifference stretching across the viewport of the drift sparrow. A battered freighter limping through the fringes of the Netheria expanse. Inside, the air was thick with the hum of failing recyclers and the faint tang of recycled water. Luca Zane, a wiry human with calloused hands and eyes that had seen too many empty horizons, leaned back in the pilot's chair, his boots propped on the console. He was alone, as always, hauling cargo no one else wanted to touch, scrap tech and expired rations bound for some forgotten colony. The solitude suited him. It was predictable, unlike people, unlike war. He was halfway through a protein bar, grimacing at its chalky aftertaste, when the proximity alarm screamed. Luca jolted upright, heart pounding, as red lights bathed the cockpit. His fingers flew across the controls, pulling up the sensor feed. A ship, sleek, angular, and unmistakably alien, hovered just off his starboard. Its hull shimmered like liquid obsidian, reflecting the stars in a way that made his stomach twist. It wasn't broadcasting any ident codes. Pirates, scavengers, or something worse. "Great," Luca muttered, rubbing his stubbled jaw. "Just what I need. Another day in paradise." Before he could plot an escape vector, the comms crackled to life. No video, just a voice, low, smooth, and curling around his senses like smoke. "Human vessel," it purred, unmistakably feminine, with an accent that danced between silk and steel. "I mean you no harm. May I board?" Luca froze. The voice wasn't mechanical, not like the AI drones he'd dealt with at trade hubs. It was alive, warm, dangerous. His gut told him to slam the thrusters and run, but the drift sparrow was no racer, and that alien ship could outrun a comet. He licked his lips, weighing his odds. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice rougher than he intended. "And why the hell should I trust you?" A soft laugh like the chime of crystal echoed through the comms. "I am Nyra of the Orali's Dominion. I'm stranded. My ship is damaged and I need shelter. I can offer you something in return." A pause heavy with promise. "I can cook your rations, human. I can make your nights unforgettable." Luca's breath caught. The way she said unforgettable sent a shiver down his spine, equal parts intrigue and warning. He wasn't some naive spacer fresh out of the academy. He'd heard stories of alien sirens, beings who lured humans with honeyed words, only to leave them broken or dead. But there was something in her voice, a flicker of vulnerability beneath the seduction, that made him hesitate. Besides, his rations tasted like cardboard and his nights, well, they were just him and the hum of the ship's engines. "Fine," he said, against his better judgment. "But you try anything, and I've got a pulse rifle with your name on it." A lie, he hadn't fired a weapon since basic training, and his only rifle was a rusted stun baton under the bunk. Still, it sounded good. The alien ship docked with a soft thud, the airlock hissing as it sealed. Luca stood by the hatch, one hand on the stun baton, his heart hammering. The door slid open, and there she was, Nyra. She stepped into the dim light of the drift sparrow's cargo bay, and Luca forgot how to blink. She was tall, her figure draped in a form-fitting suit of fur-like fabric that shimmered like starlight on snow. Her hair, white as a comet's tail, cascaded over her shoulders, framing a face that was both alien and breathtakingly familiar. Sharp cheekbones, full lips, and eyes like twin nebulas, glowing faintly violet. Two pointed ears, delicate as a fox's, twitched slightly, catching the hum of the ship. She moved with a grace that made the air feel heavier, her every step a quiet promise of something Luca couldn't quite name. "You're not what I expected," he managed, his voice dry as the rations in his locker. Nyra's lips curved into a smile, slow and deliberate. "And you, Luca Zane, are exactly as I imagined. Rough around the edges, but..." She stepped closer, her scent, a mix of ozone and something floral filling his senses. "There's fire in you, I can feel it." He took a step back, bumping into a crate. "How do you know my name?" His hand tightened on the stun baton, but her eyes held him, unyielding like a predator sizing up prey, or a lover sizing up a partner. "Your ship's transponder," she said, her voice a soft caress. "I'm good with tech, and other things." She tilted her head, her ears flicking. "Shall I prove it? Your rations are in the galley, yes? Let me make you something edible." Luca should have said no. Should have locked her in the cargo bay and called for backup. But his stomach growled, and his nights had been cold for too long. "Galley, that way," he said, jerking his thumb toward the corridor. "Don't touch anything else." Nyra glided past him, her tail, long, white, and impossibly soft, brushing his arm as she moved. It wasn't an accident. Nothing about her felt accidental. As she disappeared into the galley, Luca slumped against the wall, exhaling. "What the hell am I doing?" he muttered. The galley was a cramped nook with a single burner and a shelf of vacuum-sealed ration packs. Nyra worked with a quiet efficiency, her slender fingers tearing open packets and mixing their contents with a grace that made even dehydrated protein look like art. She hummed softly, a melody that seemed to vibrate in Luca's chest, stirring memories he didn't know he had, warm nights, soft touches, a life before the void. When she handed him a plate, the aroma hit him like a shockwave. It wasn't just rations, it was food, real food, spiced, warm, and somehow comforting like a memory of home he'd long buried. "How?" he asked, staring at the plate. "Orali's secrets," she said with a wink. "Eat, Luca. You'll need your strength." He took a bite, and for a moment, the universe didn't feel so empty. They sat across from each other in the galley, the hum of the ship fading into the background. Nyra watched him, her violet eyes unblinking, as if she could see through his skin to the thoughts beneath. "You're lonely out here," she said, not a question. "Drifting, with no one to share the stars." Luca snorted, deflecting. "I like it that way, keeps things simple." "Simple is safe," she agreed, leaning closer. Her voice dropped, a velvet whisper. "But safe isn't living. Let me show you more than rations, Luca. Let me burn your nights." His fork froze halfway to his mouth. Her words were a spark, igniting something reckless in him. He wanted to laugh it off, to tell her to back off, but her gaze held him, and the air between them crackled with unspoken possibilities. Before he could respond, the ship's alarm blared again, this time a deep, guttural klaxon that meant trouble. Big trouble. Luca bolted to the cockpit, Nyra trailing behind like a shadow. The sensor feed showed 3 ships, Zarathian raiders, their jagged hulls bristling with weapons, closing in fast. "Pirates," Luca spat, hands flying over the controls. "They must have tracked your ship." Nyra's ears flattened, her expression darkening. "They want me," she said quietly. "I'm valuable to them." "Valuable how?" Luca shot her a glance, his pulse racing. "What aren't you telling me?" She met his gaze, her eyes fierce now, not seductive. "Help me, Luca. Fight them off, and I'll tell you everything. I promise." The raiders fired a warning shot, a plasma bolt grazing the drift sparrow's hull. The ship shuddered, and Luca cursed. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. But Nyra's voice, her presence, her damn cooking, it stirred something in him, something human, something that refused to back down. "Strap in," he growled, powering up the ship's meager defenses. "We're not running." As the raiders closed in, Luca's hands steadied on the controls, and Nyra's violet eyes burned with a strange, quiet pride. The stars outside weren't just cold anymore. They were a battlefield. And Luca Zane, a nobody freighter pilot, was about to make them his. The drift sparrow shuddered again as another plasma bolt grazed its hull, the cockpit lights flickering like a dying star. Luca's fingers danced across the console, rerouting power to the shields with a precision born of desperation. The 3 Zarathian raider ships loomed on the sensor feed, their jagged silhouettes slicing through the void like predators circling wounded prey. His heart pounded, not just from the threat outside, but from the woman standing behind him, her presence a heat that burned hotter than the alarms. Nyra leaned over his shoulder, her white hair brushing his cheek, her breath warm against his ear. "You're braver than you think, Luca Zane," she murmured, her voice a velvet blade, sharp and soft all at once. "Most humans would have run by now." Luca snorted, though his pulse quickened at her closeness. "Most humans don't have a death wish, or a passenger who smells like trouble." He shot her a glance, catching the glint in her violet eyes. They weren't just beautiful, they were calculating, watching him like she could see the storm brewing in his soul. He forced his focus back to the controls, but her scent, ozone, and wildflowers lingered, clouding his thoughts. Trouble. Nyra's lips curved, her tone teasing, almost challenging. "I promised to burn your nights, didn't I? But first, we survive this." Her hand grazed his arm, light as a feather but electric, sending a jolt through him that rivaled the ship's warning klaxons. She pointed at the sensor feed. "Their lead ship is powering its main cannon. If you don't act now, we're dust." Luca's jaw tightened. The drift sparrow wasn't built for combat. Its defenses were a pair of outdated laser turrets and a hull that groaned under stress. But running wasn't an option. The raiders were too fast. He flipped a switch, arming the turrets, and muttered, "Hold on to something." Nyra didn't move, her body swaying with the ship's motion, her fur-clad curves catching the dim cockpit light. "I trust you," she said, and the way she said it, low, intimate, like a secret shared in the dark, made his chest tighten. Trust. He barely trusted himself. Yet her confidence, real or not, lit a spark in him, a reckless fire that felt dangerously human. He slammed the thrusters, banking the drift sparrow hard to starboard. The raiders' first volley missed, streaking past in a blaze of plasma that lit up the void. Luca fired the turrets, their beams lancing out in erratic bursts. One grazed the lead raider, sparking across its hull, but it wasn't enough. The enemy ships adjusted, their formation tightening like a noose. "They're locking on," Nyra said, her voice calm but urgent. She slid into the co-pilot's seat, her fingers flying over the auxiliary console with a speed that made Luca blink. "I'm rerouting your power grid. Your shields are at 30%, pathetic, but I can work with it." "Who are you?" Luca demanded, dodging another plasma bolt. The ship groaned, metal creaking under the strain. No stranded passenger knows how to hack a freighter's systems like that. Nyra's smile was a flicker of starlight, both alluring and dangerous. "I told you I'm good with tech." She leaned closer, her knee brushing his under the console, deliberate and distracting. "And other things. Focus, Luca. You're the hero here." Hero, the word hit him like a punch. He wasn't a hero, he was a drifter, a nobody hauling scrap across the galaxy. But her voice, her touch, her damn presence made him want to be more. He gritted his teeth, angling the drift sparrow into a wild spiral to evade the raider's lock. The cockpit shook, and Nyra's hand found his, her fingers cool and steady, grounding him in the chaos. "Divert power to the rear shields," she said, her tone shifting from seductive to commanding. "Then aim for their sensor array. It's the glowing node on the lead ship's flank." Luca didn't question her. He punched the commands, feeling the ship lurch as power surged to the shields. The turrets fired again, a lucky shot clipping the raider's sensor node. Sparks erupted on the feed, and the lead ship veered, its formation faltering. Nyra let out a soft laugh, triumphant and sultry. "Good boy," she purred, her voice wrapping around him like a warm night. "Don't push it," Luca growled, but a grin tugged at his lips. For the first time in years, he felt alive, heart racing, blood pumping, not just from the fight but from her. From the way she looked at him, like he was more than a pilot, more than a man alone in the void. The raiders regrouped, their comms crackling with guttural alien voices. Luca didn't speak Zarathian, but their tone, angry, desperate, told him enough. "They really want you," he said, glancing at Nyra. "Why?" Her ears twitched, and for a moment her mask of confidence slipped, revealing something raw. Fear, regret. "I'm a defector," she admitted, her voice softer now, almost vulnerable. "I carry secrets they'd kill to keep buried. Secrets about Orales, about the war." Luca's stomach dropped. A defector. That explained the raiders, the high-tech ship, her unnatural grace. But it didn't explain why she was here, with him, cooking his rations and whispering promises that set his skin on fire. "What kind of secrets?" He pressed, dodging another barrage. Nyra leaned in, her lips brushing his ear, her breath hot and teasing. "Help me escape them, Luca, and I'll show you. Not just secrets, not just nights, everything." Her hand slid to his thigh, a bold, fleeting touch that sent heat racing through him. It was a distraction he couldn't afford, yet he craved it, craved her, even as the ship rocked under enemy fire. The lead raider fired again, a direct hit that sent sparks flying from the console. The shields flickered, dropping to 10%. Luca cursed, his hands a blur as he rerouted power again. "We can't outgun them," he said, voice tight. "We need a plan." Nyra's eyes gleamed, her smile sharp and predatory. "Then we outsmart them. There's an asteroid field half a parsec from here, dense enough to lose them if you're good enough to fly it." Luca laughed, a bitter, reckless sound. "Good enough? Lady, you have no idea who you're dealing with." He didn't either, not really. But her belief in him, real or manipulative, was a drug he couldn't shake. He plotted the course, the drift sparrow's engines roaring as it dove toward the asteroid field, a maze of spinning rocks and cosmic debris. Nyra's hand lingered on his, her touch both anchor and flame. "You're doing this for me," she whispered, her voice a siren's call in the chaos. "But you're also doing it for you, for the man you could be." The asteroids loomed ahead, jagged and unforgiving, as the raiders' weapons lit up the void behind them. Luca's heart thundered, torn between the fight and the woman beside him, her promises wrapping around him like a tether to something greater. Something human, something worth risking everything for. The Driftsboro screamed through the void, its engines roaring like a wounded beast as it plunged into the asteroid field. Jagged rocks spun past the viewport, some so close Luca could have sworn he saw their craggy surfaces glint with forgotten minerals. His hands gripped the controls, knuckles white, as he wove the freighter through the deadly maze, each turn a heartbeat away from disaster. The Zarathian raiders pursued, their plasma bolts lighting up the darkness, grazing asteroids that exploded into showers of debris. Luca's pulse thundered, but it wasn't just the chase driving it. Nyra's presence beside him, her cool fingers still lingering on his hand, felt like a current running through his veins, equal parts fire and anchor. Left now. Nyra's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and urgent, her violet eyes locked on the sensor feed. Her white hair glowed faintly in the cockpit's dim light, her fox-like ears twitching with every ping of the proximity alarm. That boulder's shifting, 3 degrees port or we're scrap. Luca didn't hesitate. He yanked the controls, the Driftsboro banking hard, its hull groaning as a massive asteroid loomed and then slid past, missing them by meters. "You're calling shots like you've flown this rust bucket before," he said, his voice tight but laced with a grudging respect. Her instincts were uncanny, almost too perfect, and a part of him wondered again what secrets she carried, what made her so valuable to the raiders. Nyra's lips twitched, a fleeting smile that was both teasing and fierce. "I've flown worse," she said, her hand brushing his arm, deliberate and warm. "Keep us alive, Luca, and I'll show you what else I can do." Her words were a spark, igniting a heat in him that battled the cold fear of the chase. She leaned closer, her breath grazing his neck, and for a moment the asteroid field faded, and there was only her scent, her voice, her promise of nights that burned. A plasma bolt slammed into the rear shields, snapping him back to reality. The console sparked, and the shield gauge flickered, 5%. "We're not gonna make it," Luca growled, dodging another rock. The raiders were relentless, their lead ship weaving through the asteroids with a precision that made his stomach churn. They were gaining, and the Driftsboro was running out of tricks. Nyra's eyes narrowed, her fingers flying over the co-pilot's console. "There's a gap ahead," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "A narrow channel between 2 asteroids. If you thread it, we can lose them." Luca shot her a glance, his heart pounding. "Thread it? That's a damn needle's eye. One wrong move and we're pulverized." Her gaze met his, unyielding, her violet eyes blazing with something that wasn't just confidence, it was faith. In him. "You're not just any pilot, Luca Zane," she said, her voice low, almost a purr. "You're human, you defy the odds, now fly." Her words hit him like a shockwave, stirring something deep, something he'd buried under years of drifting. He wasn't just a nobody hauling scrap. He was human, and humans didn't just survive, they thrived in the face of impossible odds. Gritting his teeth, he pushed the thrusters to their limit, the Driftsboro screaming as it dove toward the narrow channel. The asteroids loomed like titans, their surfaces pocked and menacing, the gap between them barely wider than the ship itself. "Hold on," he muttered, more to himself than to her. The ship lurched, metal screeching as it grazed the edge of an asteroid. Sparks flew and the cockpit shook, but Luca held the course, his hand steady, his focus absolute. Nyra's hand found his again, her touch a lifeline in the storm, and he felt her pulse, fast, alive, matching his own. They shot through the channel, the walls of stone closing in, so close he could feel their weight in his bones. The raiders fired, their bolts missing by inches, detonating against the asteroids in bursts of molten rock. Then, with a final roar of the engines, the Driftsboro burst free, emerging into open space. The raiders, too large to follow, veered off, their formation breaking as one ship collided with an asteroid, erupting in a silent fireball that lit up the void. Luca let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his body slumping in the chair. "We made it," he said, voice hoarse. "Holy hell, we made it." Nyra's laugh was soft, triumphant, and dangerously intimate. She unstrapped from the co-pilot's seat and slid closer, her fur-clad body brushing against his. "You made it," she corrected, her voice a velvet caress. "You flew like a god, Luca." Her fingers traced the edge of his jaw, light but deliberate, sending a shiver through him. "I knew you had it in you." He turned to face her, his breath catching at her closeness. Her eyes were molten, her lips parted just enough to hint at promises unspoken. The cockpit felt smaller, the air charged with something heavier than the aftermath of battle. "You're gonna get me killed," he said, but there was no heat in it, only a raw, reckless want. "Or I'll make you live," she countered, her voice dropping to a whisper that curled around his heart. She leaned in, her lips hovering a breath from his, so close he could taste the ozone on her skin. "You saved us, Luca. Let me thank you." Before he could respond, the comms crackled, shattering the moment. A new signal, not Zarathian, but something colder, mechanical. "Human vessel," a voice hissed, its tone devoid of Nyra's warmth. "Surrender the Orali's defector, or we will reduce you to ash." Luca's blood ran cold. He pulled back, his eyes locking onto the sensor feed. A new ship had appeared, larger than the Raiders, its hull a sleek, predatory black. It was Zarathian, it was Orali's, Nyra's own people. Her ears flattened, her body tensing, and for the first time, Luca saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. "Who are they?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "And why do they want you so badly?" Nyra's gaze dropped, her fingers tightening around his. "They're the Dominion's enforcers," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I stole something from them, something that could change everything, for Orali's, for humanity, for the galaxy." "What did you steal?" Luca pressed, his heart racing as the Orali's ship powered its weapons, a red glow pulsing on the feed. Nyra looked up, her eyes fierce again, but laced with a desperate hope. "A map," she said. "A map to a weapon that could make humanity unstoppable. But it comes at a cost." The ship's alarms blared again, and Luca's mind raced. A weapon. A map. A woman who cooked his rations and set his nights ablaze, now dragging him into a war he didn't understand. He should have been terrified. He should have turned her over. But as her hand gripped his, as her eyes burned into his, he felt something else. A spark, a fire, a human defiance that refused to break. "Strap in," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We're not done yet." The Driftsborough's cockpit was a storm of flashing lights and blaring alarms, the Orali's enforcer ship looming on the sensor feed like a predator ready to strike. Its sleek black hull pulsed with an ominous red glow, its weapons charging with a hum that vibrated through the freighter's frame. Luca's hands hovered over the controls, his mind racing to process Nyra's bombshell, a stolen map to a weapon that could make humanity unstoppable. Her words hung in the air, heavy with promise and danger, her violet eyes locked on his, pleading and fierce. The galaxy was closing in, and Luca, a nobody pilot, was caught in its jaws. "Strap in," he'd said, but now, staring at the enforcer ship, he wasn't sure if he meant it for Nyra or himself. He punched the comms, his voice sharper than he intended. "Talk, Nyra, what's this weapon, and why's it worth dying for?" Nyra's ears twitched, her fur-clad figure shifting in the co-pilot seat. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his cheek, and for a fleeting moment, the alarms faded, and there was only her. Her scent of ozone and wildflowers, her voice a low, intimate purr. "It's called the Starforge," she said, her words dripping with weight. "A relic from a dead civilization, hidden in the Nytheria expanse. It can reshape matter, bend gravity, turn a single ship into a fleet, but it's temperamental. Only a human mind can wield it." Luca blinked, his hands freezing on the controls. "A human mind? You're telling me this galaxy-breaking superweapon needs me?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed in the cramped cockpit. "Lady, I can barely keep this ship from falling apart. You've got the wrong guy." Nyra's smile was slow, almost wicked, her eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and challenge. "Oh, Luca, you're exactly the right guy." Her hand slid to his knee, her touch light but deliberate, sending a jolt through him that made his face burn. "You flew through that asteroid field like a comet. You've got fire, instinct, heart, everything the Starforge craves." The ship lurched as the enforcers fired a warning shot, a plasma bolt scorching the Driftsborough's hull. Luca cursed, yanking the controls to evade, but Nyra's hand stayed on his knee, steady and maddeningly distracting. "Focus," he snapped, though his voice cracked, betraying the heat her touch ignited. "Unless you want to flirt us both into a fireball." She laughed, a sound like starlight, and withdrew her hand, slowly, as if savoring his discomfort. "Fine, hero," she teased, her tone playful but edged with urgency. "But don't pretend you don't like it." She tapped the console, pulling up a holographic map that flickered into existence between them. It showed a swirling vortex of stars, a path snaking through the expanse to a glowing point labeled in alien script. "The Starforge is here," she said. "If we reach it, we can end this chase, but we need to lose them first." Luca glanced at the map, then at the sensor feed. The Enforcer ship was closing fast, its weapons locking on. Lose them? With what? This ship's got less horsepower than a broken drone. He scanned the console, desperation clawing at him, and spotted an old trick from his smuggling days, a cargo jettison protocol. "Hold on," he said, a grin tugging at his lips. "Time to get creative." He flipped a switch, and the Driftsburrow's cargo bay hissed open, ejecting a cloud of scrap metal and ration crates into the void. The debris scattered, forming a chaotic screen that fouled the Enforcer's sensors. Their ship veered, its plasma bolts going wide, and Luca seized the chance, diving the Driftsburrow toward a nearby nebula. A swirling haze of gas and dust that could hide them if they didn't choke on it first. Nyra clapped, her laugh bubbling up, bright and infectious. "Clever human," she said, her ears perking. "You're full of surprises." She leaned in, her shoulder brushing his, and whispered, "I like surprises." Luca's face flushed, and he fumbled the controls, the ship dipping briefly before he corrected it. "Stop that," he muttered, half laughing, half exasperated. "You're gonna make me crash." Her teasing was a weapon, disarming him in ways he hadn't expected, and the awkward heat between them was as dangerous as the Enforcers on their tail. The nebula loomed ahead, its violet and crimson clouds swallowing the stars. Luca eased the ship into its embrace, the sensors flickering as dust clogged their readings. The Enforcer's signal weakened, but Luca knew they weren't safe yet. "This nebula's a gamble," he said, glancing at Nyra. "If their scanners are better than ours, we're sitting ducks. Then we make them blind," Nyra replied, her fingers dancing over the console. She hacked into the Driftsburrow's comms, broadcasting a burst of static laced with Aurali's code, a trick to jam the Enforcer's sensors. "That'll buy us time," she said, her voice tinged with pride. "But we need to talk, Luca, about the Starforge, about us." "Us?" Luca's brow shot up, his hands still on the controls. The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. He wasn't sure if she meant the mission or something more, and the uncertainty made his chest tight. "You're a defector, Nyra. I'm a nobody. There's no us in a firefight." Her eyes softened, but her smile was sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. "You're wrong," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that sent shivers down his spine. "You're the spark, Luca. The Starforge needs you, and—" She hesitated, her ears flicking, a rare crack in her confidence. "I need you." The words hit harder than any plasma bolt. Luca opened his mouth to respond, but the console beeped, cutting through the tension. The Enforcers had adapted, their signal piercing the nebula's haze. A new alarm blared, tractor beam lock. The Driftsburrow shuddered, its engines whining as the Aurali's ship began to reel them in. "Damn it!" Luca slammed his fist on the console, his mind racing. "They've got us hooked. We're not breaking free without a miracle." Nyra's hand found his again, her touch firm, urgent. "Then we make a miracle," she said, her voice fierce. She pulled a small device from her fur suit, a sleek, glowing orb pulsing with faint blue light. "This is the key to the Starforge," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "If they take me, they'll take it. But if you can get us to that map's coordinates, we can change everything." Luca stared at the orb, then at her. The nebula swirled outside, the Enforcer's tractor beam tightening like a noose. He was no hero, no savior, but her faith in him, her maddening, intoxicating faith, was rewriting who he thought he was. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Let's make a miracle." He punched the thrusters, the Driftsburrow straining against the tractor beam, and Nyra's smile lit up the cockpit, a beacon in the storm. The galaxy was watching, and Luca Zane was about to show it what a human could do. The Driftsburrow groaned under the relentless pull of the Aurali's Enforcer's tractor beam, its engines screaming in protest as Luca fought to keep the ship from being dragged into the jaws of the sleek, black warship. The nebula's swirling violet clouds cloaked them in a fragile veil, but the red glow of the Enforcer's weapons pulsed through the haze, a heartbeat of impending doom. Luca's hands were slick with sweat on the controls, his mind a whirlwind of fear and defiance, but Nyra's touch, her cool fingers gripping his, her glowing orb pulsing between them, anchored him in the chaos. Her words echoed in his head, a miracle. They needed a miracle, and Luca was damn well going to deliver one. He glanced at the orb in her hand, its blue light casting shadows across her face, highlighting the sharp curve of her cheekbones and the soft parting of her lips. "That key," he said, his voice rough, "you said it's for the Starforge. Can it help us now?" Nyra's violet eyes flickered with something unreadable. Desire, determination, or both. She leaned closer, her fur-clad body brushing against his arm, the contact sending a shiver through him despite the blaring alarms. "Not yet," she whispered, her voice a sultry melody that wrapped around his senses. "It needs the Starforge to activate, but you, Luca—" Her fingers traced up his arm, slow and deliberate, igniting a warmth that spread like wildfire. "You're the spark that makes it possible." The ship lurched, the tractor beam tightening its grip, and Luca's heart pounded, not just from the danger but from her. Her touch, her voice, her maddening confidence in him, it was intoxicating, dangerous, pulling him into a dance he wasn't sure he could lead. "You keep talking like that," he said, forcing a grin to mask the heat rising in his cheeks, "and I'm gonna forget we're about to be space dust." Her laugh was low, a purr that vibrated in the cramped cockpit. "Then let's make this moment count," she said, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made the nebula outside seem dim. She shifted, her knee pressing against his under the console, a deliberate move that sent a jolt through him. "If we're fighting for our lives, Luca, let's fight like we mean it, like we have something worth saving." The air between them crackled, heavy with unspoken promises. Luca's breath hitched as her hand slid to his chest, resting over his heart, her touch light but searing through his worn flight jacket. "Nyra," he started, his voice hoarse, "this isn't the time." "It's always the time," she countered, her lips curving into a smile that was both tender and wicked. She leaned in, her white hair falling like a curtain around them, her scent, ozone and wildflowers, filling his lungs. Her lips hovered a breath from his, close enough to feel the warmth of her, close enough to taste the edge of her promise. "You're human, Luca. You live for moments like this, when the stars are falling and the heart burns brighter than any sun." The cockpit felt impossibly small, the alarms a distant hum as her words sank into him. He wanted to push her away, to focus on the fight, but her gaze held him, her fingers pressing just enough to feel his heartbeat race. For a moment, he let himself imagine it, her body pressed closer, her lips claiming his, the galaxy fading as they burned together in the dark. But the ship shuddered again, snapping him back, and he gripped the controls, his resolve hardening even as his skin tingled from her touch. "All right," he said, his voice low, a mix of defiance and desire. "Let's give them a show." He diverted the last of the drift sparrow's power to the engines, the ship straining against the tractor beam with a scream of metal. Nyra's hand stayed on his chest, her touch a steady pulse, urging him on. She tapped the console, her fingers a blur as she hacked into the ship's systems again. "I'm boosting the thrusters with an overload pulse," she said, her voice calm but laced with excitement. "It'll fry half our circuits, but it might break their lock." "Might?" Luca shot her a look, his grin crooked. "You're gambling my ship on might." Her eyes sparkled, her ears flicking playfully. "I'm gambling on you," she said, her hand sliding down to his wrist, her touch lingering. "And I always bet on winners." The overload pulse hit, the drift sparrow surging forward with a violent lurch that broke the tractor beam's grip. The cockpit shook, sparks flying from the console, and Luca whooped, a raw human sound of triumph. The Enforcer ship fell back, its sensors scrambled by Nyra's hack, but Luca knew it wouldn't last. He piloted the ship deeper into the nebula, its clouds swallowing them whole, a temporary sanctuary in a galaxy that wanted them dead. As the alarms quieted, the silence between them was electric, charged with the aftershock of their escape. Nyra unstrapped from her seat, her movements fluid, almost feline, as she closed the distance between them. "You did it," she said, her voice a soft caress, her body so close he could feel the heat radiating from her. "You broke their hold." "We did it," Luca corrected, his voice rough with adrenaline and something deeper. He turned to face her, his breath catching as her hand found his again, her fingers intertwining with his. The cockpit was dim, the nebula's glow casting shadows across her face, making her look like a dream he wasn't sure he deserved. "Luca," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, her lips so close he could almost taste them. "You're more than a pilot. You're the man who could change the stars." Her free hand traced the line of his jaw, her touch sending a shiver through him, and for a moment he forgot the danger, the war, the galaxy outside. There was only her eyes, her warmth, her promise of nights that burned brighter than any sun. He leaned in, drawn to her like a ship to a beacon, but the console beeped, a sharp reminder of reality. The enforcers were back, their signal piercing the nebula's haze, closer than before. Nyra's ears flattened, her body tensing, but her hand stayed in his, a lifeline in the storm. "They're not giving up," Luca said, his voice steady despite the fire in his veins. "What's next?" Nyra's smile was fierce, her eyes blazing with a mix of defiance and desire. "We run," she said, her voice a sultry challenge. "We fight, and we find the Starforge, together." The Drift Sparrow's engines roared to life, carrying them deeper into the nebula's heart, as Luca and Nyra faced the unknown, bound by a touch that burned, a fight that defined them, and a destiny that could reshape the stars. The Drift Sparrow sliced through the nebula's swirling clouds, its engines a defiant roar against the oppressive silence of the cosmos. The violet and crimson haze cloaked them, a fleeting shield from the Aurali's enforcers whose relentless pursuit pulsed on the sensor feed like a predator's heartbeat. Luca's hands gripped the controls, his jaw tight, his mind still reeling from Nyra's touch, her fingers intertwined with his, her words a promise of nights that burned hotter than stars. Her presence was a fire in the cockpit, a distraction he couldn't shake, even as the galaxy hunted them. The Starforge, the mysterious weapon she spoke of, loomed in his thoughts, its promise of power both thrilling and terrifying. Nyra sat beside him, her fur-clad figure bathed in the nebula's glow, her white hair shimmering like a comet's tail. Her violet eyes flicked between the holographic map and the sensor feed, her ears twitching with every ping of the enforcer's signal. "We're close," she murmured, her voice a velvet thread weaving through the tension. "The coordinates are just beyond this nebula. If we can hold them off a little longer, we'll reach the Starforge." Luca nodded, his focus split between the controls and the heat of her hand in his. "And then what?" he asked, his voice rough with adrenaline and the lingering echo of her touch. "We get this weapon, and what? Save the galaxy. Or just save ourselves." Her smile was enigmatic, her fingers tightening around his. "Both," she said, her tone soft but laced with steel. "You're human, Luca. You don't just survive, you rewrite the stars." Her words stirred something in him, a spark of defiance that felt bigger than himself, bigger than the Drift Sparrow's creaking hull. But before he could respond, the console screamed, a new alert, sharper, more urgent than before. The sensor feed flickered, revealing not just the Aurali's enforcer ship but something else, something massive, emerging from the nebula's depths. It was no ship, it was a structure, ancient and sprawling, its surface a lattice of glowing blue conduits and jagged, crystalline spires. The Starforge, it hung in the void like a forgotten god, its presence pulling at Luca's chest, a mix of awe and dread. "That's it," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. Nyra's eyes widened, her ears perking, but her expression shifted, less triumph, more uncertainty. "Yes," she said, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "But we're not alone." Before Luca could process her words, the Drift Sparrow shuddered violently, a deep, resonant hum vibrating through the hull. The enforcers hadn't fired, this was something else. The console lit up with warnings, an energy surge, emanating not from the pursuers but from the Starforge itself. The structure pulsed, its conduits flaring, and a beam of blue light shot out, enveloping the Drift Sparrow in a shimmering cage. The engines stalled, the controls locked, and Luca's heart stopped as the ship went dead, floating helplessly toward the ancient relic. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, slamming his fist on the console. The screens flickered, displaying alien glyphs he couldn't read, their shapes twisting like living things. He turned to Nyra, his pulse racing. "You said you had a key. Use it." Nyra's hand trembled as she held the glowing orb, its blue light pulsing in sync with the Starforge. I didn't expect this," she admitted, her voice cracking for the first time. "The Starforge isn't just a weapon. It's alive. And it's choosing." "Choosing?" Luca's voice rose, a mix of fear and frustration. "Choosing what? Us? Or them?" He gestured at the sensor feed, where the Aurali's enforcer ship was now caught in a similar beam, its sleek hull glinting as it was drawn toward the Starforge alongside them. Nyra's ears flattened, her eyes darting between the orb and the structure outside. "It's choosing its wielder," she said, her words heavy with a truth she hadn't shared before. "The Starforge doesn't just need a human mind, it needs a worthy one, and it's testing us, right now." Luca's stomach dropped. The twist hit him like a plasma bolt, Nyra hadn't told him everything. The Starforge wasn't just a tool, it was a sentient force, and they were its prey, not its masters. "You knew this and didn't tell me?" he said, his voice low, betrayed. Her hand was still in his, but now it felt like a chain, binding him to a fate he hadn't chosen. "I didn't know it would act," she said, her voice urgent, her violet eyes pleading. "I stole the map, the key, to keep it from the Dominion. They'd use it to enslave worlds. But you, Luca," she leaned closer, her breath warm, her touch softening despite the chaos. "You're different. The Starforge senses it. It's why I stayed with you." The cockpit trembled as the Starforge's beam tightened, pulling the drift sparrow closer. Luca's mind raced, torn between her words and the betrayal stinging his chest. Her touch, her faith, her damn cooking, they'd pulled him into this, and now he was trapped in a cosmic game he didn't understand. But her eyes, wide and desperate, held a truth he couldn't ignore. She needed him. And damn it, he needed her. The console sparked, the alien glyphs resolving into a single, chilling command: "Prove your worth." The Starforge's voice, if it was a voice, echoed in Luca's mind, cold and ancient, like the stars themselves. The ship lurched again, and Nyra gasped, her hand gripping his tighter. "It's scanning us," she said, her voice trembling. "It's looking into your soul, Luca. Don't fight it." "Don't fight it," he snapped, his voice raw. "It's hijacking my ship." But as he spoke, a strange warmth spread through him, starting at her touch and radiating inward. Images flashed in his mind, memories, dreams, moments he'd buried. A childhood under Earth's sky, a lover's laugh, a fight he'd won against impossible odds. The Starforge was digging, probing, judging. And Nyra was right, it wasn't just testing him, it was testing them. The Enforcer ship fired, its plasma bolts absorbed by the Starforge's beam, harmless but desperate. Luca realized the truth: they weren't just fighting the Dominion. They were fighting for the right to wield a power that could remake the galaxy or destroy it. "If this thing wants a show," he said, his voice steadying, "we'll give it one." Nyra's smile returned, fierce and radiant, her hand sliding to his cheek. "That's my human," she whispered, her lips so close he could feel their warmth. "Let's show the stars what we're made of." The Starforge pulsed again, its light flooding the cockpit, and Luca felt the weight of the universe on his shoulders. The twist was clear: this wasn't just a chase. It was a trial, and the prize wasn't just survival, it was everything. The Starforge's blue light flooded the drift sparrow's cockpit, a radiant cage that held the ship in its unrelenting grip. The ancient structure loomed outside, its crystalline spires pulsing like a living heart, its alien glyphs burning into Luca's mind with that chilling command: "Prove your worth." His thoughts churned, tangled with memories the Starforge had dredged up, moments of triumph, loss, and a stubborn human spark that refused to die. Nyra's hand was still on his cheek, her touch a lifeline in the storm, her violet eyes blazing with a mix of defiance and hope. The Orali's Enforcer ship, caught in its own beam, flickered on the sensor feed, a silent reminder that they weren't alone in this cosmic trial. The galaxy was watching, and Luca Zane, a nobody pilot, was at its center. He sucked in a breath, his heart pounding as the Starforge's presence pressed deeper, a weight that felt like it could crack his ribs. "This thing's in my head," he said, his voice rough, almost a growl. "It's judging me." "What the hell does it want?" Nyra's ears flicked, her white hair catching the blue glow like a halo. She leaned closer, her fur-clad shoulder brushing his, her scent, ozone and wildflowers, grounding him even as it set his nerves alight. "It wants your truth, Luca," she said, her voice low, urgent, and laced with that maddening purr. "Your heart, your will, your humanity, show it you're worthy." "Worthy?" Luca laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that echoed in the cockpit. "I'm a freighter pilot, Nyra. I haul scrap, not destinies." But even as he spoke, the Starforge's visions surged again, flashes of a bar fight he'd won with a broken bottle, a night under Earth's stars with a lover whose name he'd forgotten, a choice to keep flying when everyone else gave up. The memories weren't grand, but they were his, raw and unyielding, and they burned in his chest like a fire he couldn't douse. Nyra's fingers tightened on his, her touch both tender and fierce. "You're more than that," she said, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made the cockpit feel too small. "You flew through an asteroid field. You broke a tractor beam. You're not just a pilot, you're a storm." Her voice dropped, a sultry whisper that sent a shiver down his spine. "And I'm caught in it." Luca's face flushed, and he fumbled the controls, the drift sparrow dipping slightly before he corrected it. "Damn it, Nyra," he muttered, half laughing, half exasperated. You pick the worst times to say stuff like that. Her teasing was a weapon, disarming him in the middle of a cosmic trial, and the awkward heat between them was as dangerous as the Starforge's judgment. She grinned, her ears perking playfully. "Timing my specialty," she said, leaning in so close her lips nearly brushed his ear. "Keeps you on your toes, doesn't it?" Her hand slid to his shoulder, a bold move that made his breath hitch, and for a moment the Starforge's weight faded, replaced by the fire of her touch. But the moment shattered as the ship lurched, the Starforge's beam intensifying. The console sparked, and a new glyph appeared, pulsing with a rhythm that matched Luca's heartbeat. The Aurali's enforcer ship fired again, its plasma bolts absorbed by the beam, but the impact sent tremors through the drift spurrow. Luca's eyes darted to the sensor feed. The enforcers were struggling, their ship's hull buckling under the Starforge's scrutiny. "They're not passing the test," he said, a chill running through him. "What happens if we fail?" Nyra's smile faded, her ears flattening. "We don't," she said, her voice firm but tinged with fear. She held up the glowing orb, its blue light pulsing faster now, syncing with the Starforge. "This key links us to it, but it's not enough. The Starforge needs a bond, a connection between us, something real." "A bond?" Luca's brow shot up, his mind racing. "What, like a handshake? Or are you talking about something else?" His tone was half joking, but the heat in his cheeks betrayed him. Her closeness, her words, her damn everything. It was pulling him apart, and the Starforge's probing only made it worse. Nyra's laugh was soft, almost nervous, a crack in her usual confidence. "Not a handshake," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She leaned in, her forehead nearly touching his, her breath warm and teasing. "It wants our truth, Luca, our hearts, together." Her hand slid to his chest, resting over his racing heart, and the cockpit seemed to shrink, the air thick with a tension that was both thrilling and terrifying. Luca swallowed hard, caught between the Starforge's judgment and the woman who was rewriting his world. "You're saying we've gotta, what? Fall in love to pass this test." He tried to laugh it off, but the words stuck, awkward and heavy, and Nyra's eyes softened, her gaze holding his like a lifeline. "Not love," she said, her voice a velvet caress. "Trust, passion, the fire that makes humans human." Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, a touch that sent sparks through him, and he wondered how he was supposed to focus when she was this close, this real. The Starforge pulsed again, its light flaring, and a new vision hit Luca. Nyra, not as she was now, but younger, running through a crystalline city, her ears pinned back, her eyes wide with fear. She was fleeing, clutching the orb, pursued by shadows that wore the same fursuits as her. The vision shifted, showing her stealing the map, her hands trembling as she hid it in her suit. She wasn't just a defector, she was a rebel risking everything for a chance at freedom. For him, for them. Luca's breath caught, the vision fading as Nyra's hand tightened on his. "You saw it," she whispered, her voice raw. "My truth. Now show it yours." He didn't know how, but the Starforge did. It pulled at him, demanding his core, his fears, his dreams, his stubborn refusal to quit. He closed his eyes, letting it in, and felt Nyra's presence beside him, her warmth a beacon in the dark. The cockpit trembled, the enforcer ship's signal fading as the Starforge's beam focused solely on them. The glyphs shifted, forming a new command: unite or fall. Luca opened his eyes, meeting Nyra's gaze. Her hand was still on his chest, her eyes wide, vulnerable and fierce. "We do this together," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Whatever it takes." Nyra nodded, her smile trembling but radiant. "Together," she echoed, her fingers intertwining with his. The Starforge's light surged, enveloping them, and Luca felt her truth merge with his, a bond forged in fire, defiance, and something dangerously close to love. The Starforge's light pulsed through the drift spurrow's cockpit, a radiant tide that enveloped Luca and Nyra, binding them in a moment that felt like eternity. The alien structure's crystalline spires glowed brighter, their blue conduits humming with a power that thrummed in Luca's bones, echoing the command etched into his mind: unite or fall. Nyra's hand was locked in his, her fingers warm and steady, her violet eyes reflecting the same fire that burned in his chest, a fire forged in defiance, trust, and something deeper, something neither of them could name. The Aurali's enforcer ship, still caught in the Starforge's beam, flickered on the sensor feed, its hull buckling under the relentless judgment of the ancient relic. The galaxy held its breath, and Luca Zane, a drifter who'd once thought himself nothing, stood at its heart. He exhaled, the weight of the Starforge's scrutiny pressing down, but Nyra's touch kept him grounded. "Together," she'd said, and now, as the light intensified, he felt her truth weaving with his, her rebellion, her fear, her faith in him merging with his stubborn human will. The cockpit trembled, the console sparking as the alien glyphs shifted, forming a new pattern that pulsed in sync with their joined hands. Luca's heart raced, not just from the trial but from her scent of ozone and wildflowers, her breath a whisper against his skin, her presence a spark that made the stars themselves seem small. "Whatever this thing wants," Luca said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "It's got us now. So what's next?" He turned to Nyra, her white hair glowing like a comet's tail, her fox-like ears perked with a mix of determination and hope. Her smile was radiant, fierce, and just a little mischievous. "It's choosing us," she said, her voice a velvet caress that sent shivers through him. "The Starforge sees your heart, Luca, your human heart, and mine." She lifted the glowing orb, its blue light flaring brighter, resonating with the structure outside. "It's ready." Before Luca could ask what she meant, the Starforge's beam tightened, pulling the drift spiro closer to its core. A massive spire that pulsed like a living star. The Enforcer ship fired a desperate salvo, its plasma bolts swallowed by the relic's light, and then, with a final groan of metal, it shattered, its fragments scattering into the void like ash. The Starforge had judged them unworthy, but Luca and Nyra were still here, still breathing, still fighting. The cockpit filled with a low hum, and the glyphs resolved into a single, clear image. A bridge, vast and crystalline at the heart of the Starforge. Luca's breath caught. "The bridge," he said, realization dawning. "That's where we need to go." Nyra nodded, her hand squeezing his. "That's where it ends," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "The Starforge's control center. If we reach it, we can claim its power. For humanity, for us." The drift spiro lurched as the beam released them, guiding the ship toward an opening in the spire. Luca piloted with a precision he didn't know he had, weaving through the relic's jagged corridors, their surfaces alive with glowing conduits. Nyra's hand stayed in his, her touch a steady pulse, and he felt her strength flow into him, her rebel spirit merging with his human fire. The corridors narrowed, the air growing heavy with the Starforge's presence, and Luca's mind buzzed with visions. Humanity rising, fleets forming, stars bending to their will. They reached the bridge, a vast chamber of crystal and light, its center dominated by a glowing dais where the orb in Nyra's hand pulsed in perfect harmony. She stepped forward, her fur suit shimmering, and placed the orb in the dais. The Starforge roared to life, its conduits flaring, and a voice, not in Luca's mind but in the air itself, spoke. "Wielders chosen. Power granted." Light exploded, blinding and warm, and Luca felt it, power, raw and infinite, flowing through him. He saw fleets forming in the void, planets bending, wars ending. The Starforge wasn't just a weapon, it was a creator, a force to reshape the galaxy. And it had chosen them, not because of Nyra's rebellion or Luca's skill, but because of their bond, a human heart and an alien soul, united in defiance. Nyra turned to him, her eyes molten, her smile soft and triumphant. "You did it, Luca," she said, stepping closer, her hand finding his chest again. "You stormed the bridge." "We did it," he corrected, his voice rough with emotion. He pulled her close, her body warm against his, and for a moment the galaxy faded. There was only her lips a breath away, her touch a promise kept. "You cooked my rations," he said, a grin breaking through. "I guess I had to conquer the stars." Her laugh was bright, a sound that filled the chamber, and she leaned in, her lips brushing his in a kiss that burned brighter than any sun. It was soft, fierce, a collision of human and alien, of drifter and rebel. The Starforge hummed around them, its power theirs to command, but in that moment, Luca didn't care about the stars. He cared about her. As they pulled apart, the chamber's walls shimmered, revealing a view of the galaxy, planets, fleets, possibilities. The Orali's dominion would come for them, but with the Starforge, they were ready. Humanity was ready. Luca took Nyra's hand, his heart steady, his path clear. "What now?" he asked, his voice light but sure. Nyra's ears flicked, her smile wicked and warm. "Now," she said, her voice a purr that promised more than nights. "We burn the galaxy together." The drift spiro powered up, its engines roaring as it left the Starforge, a new beacon in the void. Luca and Nyra stood side by side, their hands entwined, their future unwritten but blazing with possibility. The stars were no longer cold, they were theirs.